I don't usually cover police shootings immediately after they happen. The reason for that is because it becomes a process of just regurgitating what the mainstream media is saying, all of their lies and disinformation and so on. And frankly, that's the forte of the news media at this point, of the mainstream media. There are a couple of exceptions, those being like OANN and Fox's night crew, Tucker, Hannity, and Laura Ingraham. The day crew at Fox is as bad as the others, MSNBC and so on. It really is that bad at this point. In any case, we have had another police shooting that has been blown up in that very media. The coverage of the shooting of Jacob Blake has been appalling. They started out just by running the fact that this guy was black, and thus it had to be racial, it couldn't be anything else. And also the fact that he was, quote, shot in the back, which is true, but the fact that they ran it like that was to kind of create an impression that was false. It was to create the impression that this is a guy who was innocent and running away and fleeing and so on, but that wasn't the case. I mean, it's different if if you shoot a person in the back versus if you shoot them in the back whilst they're grabbing a weapon. That's a pretty important distinction. When the person is grabbing a weapon, you have to neutralize that person regardless of whether he's facing you or facing away from you. I mean, and they did have reason to believe from his movements that he was in fact grabbing for a weapon. But now, Jacob Blake will be given sainthood. He has survived, despite being shot 7 times, and is apparently paralyzed below the waist. We don't know if it's going to be permanent or not, but there it is. I do want to express that Jacob Blake, like many of these other supposed victims of police shootings, is not a good person. Regardless of the media hype, regardless of how much they try and give him sainthood, he wasn't a good person, or is not, and the world, frankly, would have been better off without him. And now we'll have to hear speeches from perhaps him, but most importantly from race-baiting opportunists, all about supposed injustice. Riots are already ongoing, communities have already been burned. Because nothing says fighting injustice quite like targeting the homes and businesses of innocent people. It happens every time. But have you ever seen some of these advertisements for the riots? Advertisements to go show up and destroy things, do what you want. They're incredible. And some businesses, hoping to be spared, have put up these signs that say Black Lives Matter, like, don't burn our stuff, don't destroy us, we're totally on your side. As if trying to deal with people who are reasonable, or even with people who are decent. And these people, these rioters, are neither. Now, if you watch the video of Jacob Blake and his interaction with police that has been so publicized, I mean, ask yourself, would you have acted as he did? He turned his back to officers who had their guns drawn and walked away from them and ignored them. Would you have done that part? I mean, would you have done that part and not expected any sort of repercussion, any sort of harm to come to you, when police actually have their guns drawn, so you know it's serious, and they're screaming stop at you? Would you keep walking? How about then walking up to the driver's side of your car, opening it, and then leaning into the vehicle, as if to grab something? Would you do that? I don't think any reasonable person would, and that's exactly what Jacob Blake did. And it turns out now we know, of course, the media didn't want to report this and didn't say so early. They were busy, building that narrative. But he did, in fact, have a knife on the driver's side floorboard. Where was he reaching in the video? Exactly there. He was reaching, it would appear, for that knife. And to any British or Japanese people who are watching that video and saying, that's not the driver's side, it is in America. In America, the driver's side is the left side of the vehicle. Okay. And to those saying they should have tried to tase him, they did. He'd already been tased once, and it didn't work. Nobody even argues that from either side, that he was tased and that it was ineffective for whatever reason. Further, the media in the early days of this said that he was a hero. He was trying to break up a fight between 2 women. He was like altruistic, perfect, in fact. Of course, none of that was true. The police were actually called because of him in some way terrorizing a woman. That's what he was called. They were called for. They weren't called for some other incident that he was trying to stop or trying to help. They just made it up. That didn't exist. The police were called to deal with him. Right? Yeah, I mean, the media lies so much now. It's like, look at the Covington case, look at Hands Up, Don't Shoot, which was also completely fake. I mean, there have been so many stories in just the last few years where the media have just made up entire stories, ran with them, and didn't expect anybody to remember, right? Well, also, the very next day, after this shooting took place, Joe Biden, or his crew, issued a statement as him. And the statement was kind of incredible. It said, quote, "And this morning, the nation wakes up yet again with grief and outrage that yet another Black American is a victim of excessive force," unquote. Really? What was racial about that shooting? I mean, seriously, as I said earlier, if you were to act as he acted in an incident with police, would you expect a different reaction? Would you expect no reaction? Would you expect a very calm response? No. There was nothing racial about the altercation, but Joe Biden tried to make it sound like there was. And remember, Biden is the guy that supposedly will restore calm, restore order. He'll calm things down, everything will be fine. Like, how? By inciting a race war? There's nothing about the shooting that was racial, yet he tried to make it so, in order to basically encourage the rioters. And then there's the other angle. His kids were in the car, in the vehicle. Well, that makes him look worse. He was willing to take on the cops in front of his kids. I mean, anyone who has a modicum of basic decency, a father, would and should do everything in his power to avoid physical conflict in front of those kids, especially with the police. And yet he didn't. He intentionally walked away from screaming cops saying stop with their guns drawn in front of his kids. He can't then scream about the welfare of his kids and what his kids saw after he acted in that manner. But if you look into this guy's history, you see a pattern of, I guess you could say, indecency, or just a pattern of the fact that he's just not a good person, and hasn't been for a very long time. Look at his Facebook profile picture that he uploaded for the world, showing two police officers, one as the devil and one as a pig. Yeah, great father, I'm sure. When the police showed up, they weren't expecting it to be him, but they ended up realizing this is the guy that already has an outstanding warrant. We already have a warrant for this guy's arrest from July 7th. What were his charges for? The charges were for misdemeanor criminal trespass to a dwelling, felony third-degree sexual assault, and misdemeanor disorderly conduct. Now, I looked up what felony third-degree sexual assault means in the state of Wisconsin, and it means rape. It means he had sex with a woman without consent. That's rape. I know third degree sounds like it's not that big of a deal, it's not that serious. It is. So when they were there screaming at him to stop, they were trying to arrest him for raping a woman. And he's the one who's being made into some kind of a hero. And will continue to be, by the way, because it fits the narrative that the media and the Democrats, which are one and the same at the moment, want to promote. He's not a good guy and hasn't been, again, for a long time. Back in 2015, I found an article by a local news source called the Racine County Eye. And they reported that a man of his age and his name and a picture that looks like him, so it's our guy, and he was charged back then in 2015 with one felony count of resisting arrest, causing a soft tissue injury to a police officer. There's a pattern here, isn't there? One misdemeanor count of carrying a concealed weapon, another count of carrying a firearm while intoxicated, endangering safety, use of a dangerous weapon, and disorderly conduct. So what did he do in this incident, back in 2015? Well, he was in a bar, drunk, with a handgun, and got into a few different arguments and started pointing his weapon, his loaded weapon, at different people in the bar that he was arguing with. That's the sort of guy we're talking about. Now, the people at the bar then called the police. And he had fled the scene, so he was already out driving around. Remember, this was after he was at a bar intoxicated. Yes, he was out driving around, and police decided to pull him over, naturally, after they had received that call. They considered it to be a high-risk event, because he'd just been, pointing a gun at random people angrily whilst drunk. So they told him, like they do in these high-risk pullovers, to put his hands out of the window of the vehicle when they pulled him over. He didn't. He didn't do that. Instead, he got out of the vehicle and started walking toward the police officers. Now, again, it's like another instance of him being aggressive toward cops. It's like, you start doing that, and then he ignored commands to get down on the ground. So he keeps on going forward as they're screaming to get down on the ground, as if to say, I'm going to mess you up. That's what his attitude is showing. They ended up having to take him down using a dog, a canine unit. Had to force him to the ground. This isn't anything that you'll hear from the mainstream media because they don't want to cover it. They don't want him to be the bad guy that he is. And all this to say that his manner of aggression toward law enforcement and refusing to be arrested and refusing to just act like a civilized human being is all part of a pattern. He's not a saint. And if anybody was a hero in the most recent incident that he was involved in, which we have video of, it was the police who showed up to protect the woman who he was terrorizing, who put their lives on the line, who did thus demonstrate actual valor. But they'll be labeled as the enemies. They're the ones who people are seeking to be charged for this for no reason. They're the ones who, after shooting him to defend themselves, then they had to offer immediate aid, and they did, which resulted in his survival despite being shot 7 times. But now, there is, and there will continue to be for years now, a parade of people talking about just how much of a saint he is, how much of a hero, and how much he has experienced injustice. Now let me tell you, in that other incident back in 2015, when he was storming toward cops after getting out of his vehicle and ignoring all their orders after having thrown his gun around in a bar, a lot of cops would have shot him then. But they didn't. He is not a person who demonstrates injustice. The justice system has let him get away with plenty, it would seem. And there are many who would say he should still be locked up, in fact. Heck, if he really is guilty of the rape, then that would certainly argue in that favor. Now his warrant has been vacated, meaning he's no longer handcuffed to his bed, but he is still on bail. There's a lot of misinformation going around about that right now. He's still out on bail. He is still facing those charges, including of third-degree sexual assault, and I would assume of something related to that altercation that he had with police, but maybe not. There's a lot of political theater going on right now. But I do find it horrendous just how much false information there has been. That's why I waited for a few days before reporting on this. But don't let anybody tell you that this guy was a hero, because he is, and has been for a long time, the villain. Wait, if you enjoyed that video, please remember to like and share. I can't grow without you. Also, if you want to be reliably notified of new videos, don't forget to subscribe to the newsletter. If you're able to support the production of these videos, I'd appreciate it if you'd subscribe at Subscribestar, or maybe get one of the healthier products, or even get some merch.